Hello, I am Kate Valentine and I would like to welcome you to Season 2 of Furtive Figaro. I started doing these video podcasts a year ago when I was singing Countess Almaviva for Scottish Opera and got such an overwhelming response to those podcasts that I've decided to keep going and try and continue to show you a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes and introduce you to some of the people that you might not otherwise meet. I am reprising the role of Countess Almaviva at the moment for English National Opera. We are currently in week 3 of rehearsals, rehearsing in 3 Mill Studios in Bromley by Bow in London. This is the first time that I have had to relearn a role in an English translation, which is absolutely fascinating because it throws up all manner of issues, some good and some bad. I thought this would be a fascinating topic to discuss with my colleagues because everyone has their own gremlins and opinions about working within English translations. When you learn a role in a foreign language, so much work has to go on behind the scenes before you even open the score and start learning the notes. The Marriage of Figaro was the first opera that I ever learned as a student, and when I first began to break down the Italian, I took a great deal of time over it because it was my first time. And what I'm finding really interesting this time round is that there is so much muscle memory associated with having learnt the opera in Italian that whenever I hear the music, my immediate response is to sing the words in Italian, and my whole body goes to sing the words in Italian. What I have discovered during this process, which is quite strange, is that I obviously have a very strong visual memory. I don't have a photographic memory by any means, I wish. But what I find is when I'm trying to recall information, my brain sometimes takes me to the page in the score that I'm trying to remember. But instead of coming up with the English translation that I'm learning for this particular production, it takes me back to the word-for-word translation that I originally wrote above the Italian, which are two completely different things. So let me show you what I mean. This is the first Figaro score I ever bought, and I've just taken this page as an example. Here you can see the original Italian, which is highlighted, the part of La Contessa. Above that, I've written the word-for-word translation, which is from the Nico Castell libretti translation series. And above that, the International Phonetic Alphabet, which acts as a guide to pronunciation. So this, I would always have at least this information written on every page of the score. And then on top of that, any musical notations or breath markings or anything else that I wanted for myself. The Jeremy Sams translation that we're working on at the moment is, instead of saying, what are you saying, what's with you, what has happened, our translation is, what is this, what is this, what has happened, which, as you can hear, is very, very similar, but not the same. So just this slight change is enough to just make your brain completely implode when you're trying to grasp the information in a split second.
I love singing I think it's really important that we sing in our own native tongue, if you will. Though we do, of course, come up against our own dialect issues or accent issues. Don't ever ask me to sing the word M-I-R-R-O-R because I'm a Midwesterner with all sorts of Polish sounds in my ears from my family that use mirror. It's like meerkat, veer. And but I think English is really important. There's an immediacy to our own personage when we sing. And even though we study other languages and we try desperately hard to absolutely into our heads in those other languages, and we can, there's something very special about saying words that you knew when you were a child.
And I think also if you're singing, you know, we're singing in the vernacular of the audience.
Yes.
And I think it adds a level of immediacy to the performance that you lose when you sing in a foreign language. You know, despite your best efforts to perform the story and to put the director's vision on the stage and your own artistic visions, you are ultimately relying on the fact that they're reading the subtitles at some point.
Yes. As long as you're diligent about your diction, you should be fine.
I mean, I guess also one of the nice things about working in English is you know that, particularly working on a comedy like this, you know that for a lot of the audience, listening to it in English has an immediacy that they don't get from Italian.
And waiting to see the subtitles, or it'll have a fresh effect for the audience as well, which will be exciting.
Well, I mean, I think that the two main challenges. I mean, there's the technical challenge of singing in English, which is, I think most singers would say, is more difficult technically than singing in Italian. Italian's a lovely language to sing in because it's got very clean vowels. English has a lot of diphthongs, and also has a lot of sense. Sense in English is often derived from consonants, particularly at the end of words. And so, when you work in English, it's technically it takes a bit more hard work to actually get as nice a sound as you want from the line, I guess.
Yeah.
English National Opera is the only opera company in the world where you debate the words that you're about to sing. It's the only place it happens. Any other place in the world, the text is decided by the composer and librettist, and that's it. It never changes. But at ENO, because we're working in translation, there's always a bit of give and take. Directors will have ideas, translators will have their own ideas, singers will have their own ideas, conductors will have their ideas. So there's always a kind of movable feast element with the translation. But then after a while, it beds down into something that everyone's happy working with. The problem is when you've done the same opera in 4 different translations, your brain just comes up with gibberish. If you forget your words when you're singing in a foreign language, you can sometimes come up with something at the last minute, or the muscles in your body will miraculously remember what it was you're supposed to be doing. But when you've got 4 different English versions in your head, invariably what happens is your brain goes and nothing comes out, or complete rubbish comes out.
And
like this morning I finished off the Jeremy Sams recit before Sable Larry and went straight into the Van Holden translation for the area.
We are given the vocal score weeks before the rehearsal start, and all the singers and the music staff prepare the score according to that translation. But as we get into production, certain elements of the translation simply don't fit other aspects of the opera. For example, the singers might find certain words difficult to sing, they might have certain issues about the translation just for their own personal interpretation, and then the actual production itself simply might not dovetail with Jeremy Sams's, Jeremy Sams was the original translator, it might not dovetail with his conception, which is now 20 years old, I believe. So when you have a new production like this, obviously translations do need to be tweaked, and we do that as we go through the rehearsal process. So, well, actually, I'm compiling a list of changes as we rehearse, and they are for 2 people. They are 2 groups of people. They are for the people who do the surtitles for the performances. Obviously, there needs to be a very accurate display of the words on the surtitles, and the covers, the understudies who are preparing the music as we rehearse, they are at home preparing the music. They will need to be given a list of the translation changes, because it's extremely difficult to unlearn a text and learn a new one on top of it. So we need to get in there as soon as possible before they get the old translation really entrenched into their learning of a role. That becomes an absolute nightmare for a singer.
You can find all of the episodes of Furtive Figaro, including the original series filmed in Scotland, at furtivefigaro.tumblr.com. Please do keep in touch. I'd love to hear any thoughts that you might have. You can follow us on Twitter at Furtive Figaro, and also find me on Facebook, Kate Valentine Soprano. So please do let us know what you think and what you would like to see.